How we doing, Jets fans? I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of the most active Jets message board on the web. And we are joined today by Chris Schubert of the Draft Network. For those of you familiar with the show, we had him on pre-draft. He had some thoughts for us, and be sure to check it out. You can get it on Spotify, you can get it on Apple iTunes, and any platform you use for your podcast. So, Chris, great class for the Jets. Seems to be the general consensus. I will open it up for you just to flood us with your thoughts on each pick. Would just like to say, first off, for those of you who checked us out the first time through, when that was sort of at the height of the Trey McBride Jets fan love affair. And I posted the question to Chris if he was on board with all of this. And he said, actually, after spending some time in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, he came away feeling like the best guy out there was Jeremy Ruckert. So start where you like, but I bet you and Jets fans alike were thrilled with that pick.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me back on. It's always fun to talk about the Jets and everything that they did. And it is a weird situation that we find ourselves in with this universal praise that this class has gotten. But I mean, how can you not feel that way with what they were able to accomplish with the first two picks inside the top 10 and then making the ultimate decision to trade back in for a guy who impressed them at the Senior Bowl when they had a chance to see him up close and personal there, and a guy that they were even considering taking with one of those two picks. And we can take it one by one. There was clearly a design by Joe Douglas and company here of, we are going to, one, surround our young quarterback with the infrastructure he needs to succeed. And two, we are not going to ignore that our head coach has a background in defense, and we are going to support him by getting him a guy up front, and we're going to get him a guy in the secondary. Because I think, Glenn, and I think you would agree with this too, in the lead up to the draft, a lot of people ask me, what are the Jets going to do? What are the Jets going to do? What are the Jets going to do? And I envisioned my dream scenario. If I was the one making the picks, Sauce at 4, Jamison Williams at 10. That just felt like, get a shutdown corner for your defense and get Zach a number one receiver in this draft class. But I told people, I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think a corner makes sense for the way Saleh runs his defense. He doesn't need true shutdown number one corners. They paid DJ Reed money in free agency. So it felt like they were going to go in a different direction. And honestly, I couldn't figure out what that direction was because I didn't think they were going to take a tackle at 4. And so we were left trying to put this puzzle together in real time. Well, far be it from us. They were playing the smoke screen game with everybody all season long, all off season long, because Sauce was their guy and they loved him. And to listen, you can think of these players what you want. Maybe you wanted George Karlaftis over Jermaine Johnson, or maybe you wanted the Jets to take David Ojabo, whatever the case may be, right? You have to appreciate the fact that Joe Douglas got 3 of the guys that he ranks inside of his top 8. 3 of the guys that he had in his personal top 8 board, he went and got. I mean, how can you not be excited about that? They get a number one playmaker in Garrett Wilson. Can't wait to get so excited to see him play this season. They get a shutdown corner in Sauce Gardner, my favorite player in the class. That's just fun. And then they go back into the first round and get a guy that they were going to consider taking at 10 in Jermaine Johnson, who you have the concerns about the fact that he had to transfer away from Georgia, only has the 1 year of production in the ACC, but a big blow up at the Senior Bowl, impressed them with their conversations with him both there and at the combine. I don't know how you cannot be, again, I'd like to warn everybody. I don't think all of these guys are going to be Pro Bowlers and studs and everyone's getting a gold jacket, right? It's not the way this works. But how can you not be excited about the process that led to this point? And at least as we sit here today, the talent and the potential that this team was able to snag with John. And I'm just talking about the day 1 picks. You can look at what they accomplished on day 2 and day 3 as well. And you have to be excited with what they were able to get to take away from their time in Vegas.
Yeah, I actually tweeted out a few weeks ago. I mentioned this after the final pick, that I was there were a couple of guys who I was really high on, that I wasn't, whose names I wasn't hearing on, on any of the draft pods. There's 2 or 3 I listened to. One, Bob Wischusen, who's the Jets announcer, does one that was really good. They were having some, Greg Cosell do some tape. Listen to your guys' pod regularly and get the names. And I was really happy one day I heard, and I forget who mentioned it, but somebody brought up Michael Clemens. Whoever had him said, hey, this guy Michael Clemens is really impressive, because a month or 2 earlier, I had watched his game against Alabama, and I thought, why isn't this guy getting more attention? He's having some really good reps against Evan Neal up and down the line. He looked good as a blitzer and just a nasty guy who got after it. So to see the Jets grab him as a sort of a, obviously he's not going to start, but if you can get a guy who can give you some quality reps coming off the edge, that's something the Jets have needed for so long. But adding Clemens and Johnson to this front, how good, actually talking offensive line and defensive line, really. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you look at it on paper, because that's all any of this is right now, is on paper. There's no football. We're just looking and envisioning. But I'm looking at Carl Lawson and Jermaine Johnson and John Franklin Myers and Quinnen Williams lined up on that four-man front with a guy like Clemens to rotate in and out. How good can this D-line be?
I mean, I think it could be extremely, it's certainly going to fit the vision of what Robert Saleh wants his defenses to be and what it was in San Francisco. He has a belief that he is not going to ask his guys to play 100% of snaps. He is going to have a rotation because it fits with his ideology of, I want my guys to, when they're on the field, give maximum effort. And you can see that in the ideology, in the way that they've assembled this roster. They went out and signed Carl Lawson. And we have not seen Carl Lawson in a New York Jets uniform other than training camp, right? So he is a bit of an unknown. You don't know what you're going to get from him in year two coming off of the Achilles. So they made a priority of, okay, we're going to invest in Jermaine Johnson. We're going to sign Jacob Martin, who in a limited role in Houston was very good last year. I think that's a name that people need to start to circle. He is going to be a part of this rotation, and in the role that they're going to ask him to play, he is going to be able to be effective. You have John Franklin Myers, you have Jermaine Johnson, you have Quinnen Williams, you have Solomon Thomas. They have a bunch of guys that they are going to rotate through, and when those guys are on the field, you are going to get max effort from those guys. They revamped this entire defensive line in 2 seasons. This has been a priority of Joe Douglas. And with Robert Saleh here, you got to get me pass rushers. You got to get me guys that can get after a quarterback, because that's the great equalizer. If I can put pressure on Josh Allen, if I can put pressure on Mac Jones, if I can put pressure on Tua, I can make it difficult for them to get the ball to Stephon Diggs, to Tyreek Hill, to Jalen Waddle. I can make it difficult for them to get the ball down the field. So that was the priority. That's what they attempted to do. And they have revamped this team. Listen, the thing that I will tell everybody who will listen, the Jets are a better team today, as we sit here on May 4th when we're recording this, than they were 3 months ago when the season ended. They are a better football team today than they were when the 2021-22 season ended. That's all you can ask for as a fan of this team. Are they better than when they ended the season? The answer is unequivocally yes. Now, will that turn into results on the field? Time will tell. The growth of Zach Wilson, the health of the offensive line. How well can these rookies play in year one? How much of their floor can they hit in year one? These are questions that you're going to have to answer. But unequivocally, we can sit here and say the Jets are a better team today than they were at the end of the season.
And now flipping it to the other side of the trenches. We spoke briefly before we kicked off. I think you and I are in agreement here. I said it a couple months ago, when all the talk about Mekhi Becton having to get in shape. I can't recall the last time this team or any team went into an offseason with an offensive lineman who was as big of a question as Mekhi Becton, who was also as important as Mekhi Becton. Because if we get a better version of what Mekhi Becton was as a rookie, he takes those reps, those snaps, and gets better as a player, and he starts heading toward reaching his ceiling as a player, he completely changes this offense because of what he does to opposing defenders. So if he's on, that's going to help everyone on that offense immensely. How big of a deal do you think he is this coming season?
So I think, and this is going to shock, I think, some Jets fans. And if you don't agree with me, understandably so. I think Mekhi Becton and the 2 tackle spots for the New York Jets is a bigger concern going into the 2022 season than the growth of Zach Wilson. Because if you don't have those 2 staples at left and right tackle, then there isn't going to be an opportunity for Zach Wilson to grow. And Mekhi Becton's obviously generating the headlines because of the injury that was not supposed to keep him out for the entire season, basically wiped out his entire sophomore season. There have been the questions about him not showing up to OTAs. I think that's a little bit overblown by those in the media about that, but I understand why it's a talking point considering we haven't seen him play since his rookie season. But the other side of the coin is your other tackle is George Fant, a guy who's in his 30s, is a oft injured player, and a guy that hasn't played a whole lot of NFL snaps in his career, right? So you have Mekhi Becton and you're hoping that you can put him at one side and you're going to put George Fant on the other. I think they're both question marks. And so the interior, however they want to configure that with Laken Tomlinson and Elijah Vera Tucker, I'm good with. I trust the coaching staff in that regard. The interior of this offensive line is not where my concern is. It's those 2 tackles, right? Those 2 tackle spots. And that's why I sit here and I go, okay, Joe Douglas got natural praise for how good his offseason was and what he was able to address needs-wise. He's getting over-the-top praise for what he did in the draft, right? For everything that he was able to accomplish. Do we just think that he gets all that praise and he doesn't understand the magnitude of the 2 tackle spots? Of course he does. Of course he understands how big of a deal it is. And that's why I don't think they're done. I think they're going to see if somebody gets cut from another team and they're going to bring somebody in that way, or they're going to look at the free agent market now that they've got their class in. They kind of have a rough idea of what the dollars are going to be on this. And I think they're not done adding to this offensive line because Max Mitchell, the kid they picked up on day 3, that's a depth piece. That's not a guy you want starting on either side. He can play a bunch of different positions on the line, but you want that in a pinch, a week where I got a guy injured, I just need to get through the week, or I need to get through a game. Max Mitchell is your guy, and he's a project to maybe down the road he can be a starter. He's not a guy that you're going to actually rely on here in year 1. So that's why I don't think, again, if you're going to put all of this praise on Joe Douglas, and then you're going to be like, well, he hasn't really figured out this spot. Well, okay. He's gotten the benefit of the doubt, and he's shown that he's been able to do all of these other things, had a great offseason, had another good draft after what we believe is a good draft in 2021. Then he deserves the benefit of the doubt here. And that's why I don't think they're done. I don't think they're done adding to this team. There's a depth piece that is going to come in here that they're going to add to this tackle rotation. I'm pretty convinced of that.
And now, speaking of looking at the roster as a whole, I made a comment to someone the other day that was actually kind of went to show, without thinking, just how much this team has improved. And I said that one of my biggest concerns was who's going to play safety along Whitehead. And really, if that's my biggest concern going into the season, considering how bad this team has been in recent years, that's really a good sign. But I'm curious, what is your, aside from the tackle situation you just discussed, when you look at the starting 22, what is the spot? Is it linebacker where Quincy Williams a little bit inconsistent? Is it safety? Like, where do you think the biggest hole on the roster is right now? Because so many of them have been plugged that there's not many to pick from.
Biggest hole, I would say, is probably that second safety spot, right? I think that's probably the one defensively that you're looking at. I think they like their linebacker group. They do. They've shown that. I mean, they could have signed somebody in free agency. They could have gone out and used one of their day 2 picks. They traded up in day 2 to get Breece Hall, right? I mean, that's clearly, I mean, you have to look at the decisions that Joe Douglas has made to understand how he feels about a certain group. They feel that this linebacker group is capable enough to be successful if they have a better pass rush and they have a better secondary. And look, they invested premium draft capital, free agency dollars to revamping this defense. They just did. I mean, they went out and got Jordan Whitehead and DJ Reed to add 2 cornerstone pieces to what they want their defense to look like. They got Sauce Gardner. They got Jermaine Johnson. They added pieces. My biggest question mark surrounding the team after the Mekhi Becton and George Fant stuff of what the tackles are going to be is the growth of Zach Wilson. What we are not going to do as Jets fans is we are not going to live through the what-if era of Sam Darnold again. Because everybody at the end of the Sam Darnold era, when we were debating whether or not to go one more year with Sam, or if we were going to draft a quarterback with the number 2 overall pick, is, man, we didn't really give Sam the tools, right? Never had a great receiving core, never had a great running game, never had a great offensive line. We were always left wondering if, man, maybe if we just go one more year and we invest in the infrastructure, it'll be fine. Guess what we're not going to say about Zach Wilson? That he never had the infrastructure, because he has more of an infrastructure than I have seen in the last probably 10 years of being a Jets fan. He's got a beefed up offensive line that does have his question marks. There's no doubt about that. But look at this receiving core: Corey Davis, Elijah Moore in year 2, Garrett Wilson, Braxton Berrios, Denzel Mims in the best shape of his life. This is my favorite thing on Twitter right now. Everyone's talking about Denzel Mims in the best shape of his life. Also, we'll let the story play out there. CJ Uzomah, Tyler Conklin, Jeremy Ruckert. You cannot sit up here and say that if Zach Wilson fails in 2022, it's because he didn't have good talent around him. They are littered with talent on the offensive side of the ball to withstand injuries. I didn't even mention the fact that he's got Michael Carter and Breece Hall as a 1-2 punch in the backfield.
We can both catch it.
They both can catch the ball in the backfield. They both fit exactly what the Mike LaFleur offense is going to be. Now, listen, I'm not here saying that the Jets are going to have a top 5 offense in the league. I'm just making the point that from an infrastructure perspective, from a talent perspective, this is the most talent they've been able to surround the young. I mean, Glenn, you've been a fan a long time. Mark Sanchez didn't have this infrastructure around him talent-wise.
Nope.
Geno Smith didn't. Sam Darnold didn't. I mean, this is the most talent that this franchise has surrounded a young quarterback with. And so he's going to sink or swim this year on his own. Now, if he swims, we all know what the potential can be. because we saw it at times last year. You saw it at BYU. You know what it can be. And I'm still bought in. I think the second half of the season should give Jets fans a ton of confidence of what this guy's going to be in year 2, because he had nobody catching passes and he was able to make plays and he was able to get this team some wins. So, I mean, listen, Zach Wilson's growth is going to make or break where this team is going to be, but they have an infrastructure in place to really set him up for success.
Well, I'm glad you went down that road, because that was going to be my final question, and one that I addressed the other day, and on one of the post draft pods I did. Bill Walsh, former San Francisco 49ers Hall of Fame head coach, famously said, and I may have the number wrong, it's somewhere 16, 17, maybe even 20. You know, he kind of said he needed 20 games to know if a quarterback had it or not. Like if it didn't click by then, he would move on. So with that in mind, and what you've just said about Zach Wilson, at what point in this season do you start to panic if he's not playing well? Is it week 3, week 17, week 12? At what point do you say this kid's got a ton of weapons and he's still throwing for 160 yards and a touchdown every week?
Sure. And I think we need to keep in mind, he did miss a good portion of last season with an injury, right? That has to be factored into this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to use the games number, because every game is different. Every game has a different script and there's different things that go on. I'm usually a 3-year guy. Like, I just have a rule of, I want to give a young player 3 years to show me something. And listen, I'll be the first person to admit, year 1 did not go well for Zach Wilson. Those first couple games before he got hurt, he was not a very good quarterback. We can just point to the 4 interception game against New England, right? These are things that you obviously have to make mention of. But the second half of the season, he limited the turnovers. And yeah, you want to see those big elite passing numbers games where he's throwing for 250, 275, and he's throwing for a number of touchdowns. But Glenn, I would also point out, how many passes did he throw down the field where the guy gets tackled inside the 5 and it could have been a touchdown and it wasn't? So if we're going to box score scout Zach Wilson a little bit without watching the games, because that's what some people have been doing, we're going to have to give this a runway. So I'm not going to panic at the midpoint of the season. Now, if he comes out of the gate and he throws multiple 4 interception games without throwing a touchdown, okay, we're going to have a bigger conversation here of what's going on. But I don't expect that, because the way he ended the season, the way that he grew throughout his rookie season, we all knew that there were going to be lumps. But I think he took those lumps in year 1, and I think you're going to see that growth here in year 2, because all he has to be in order for this to not to be a disaster is he just has to be decent. He doesn't have to be Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. And oh, by the way, it took Josh Allen until year 3 to be Josh Allen. I'd like to remind everybody of that. So he just has to show that growth. He just has to show that he's not the reason they're losing games. If every week we can be like, it's not Zach Wilson's fault they're losing games, it's X, Y, and Z, then fine. Then I think Zach Wilson is passing the test. I anticipate a decent season. I anticipate him to show all of the skills that made him the number 2 pick. I'm very optimistic about this season, maybe a little bit more so than I should be. But they have to show improvement. They can't win 4 games again next season. No. I don't even think they can win 6 games. I mean, I think it's got to be 8 or 9 wins to show that what Joe Douglas is putting in place is working, because this is now year 3. You won 2 wins. You won 2 games the first year Joe Douglas was here. You won 4 games last year. You can't win 6 games and say that this is working. You need to show more progress than that.
Yeah, I think the big thing with Wilson is going to be, as you said, sort of, and I hate saying it because I feel like we've been saying it for 8 or 9 years now with every quarterback we put in here, but show some progress, show some growth, show some of the things that, okay, that's why we drafted that guy. The way he would thread the needle in BYU, for me, Wilson was the guy that I wanted the year he came out. I know, there's some folks who wanted Fields. I felt like his ability to make tight window throws, which is something that is often missing with the bigger school guys, even if you're talking about Trevor Lawrence, because they play with so much more talent than their opponents. They've got windows that Zach Wilson could never imagine in college, and they can be off by 2 yards and still complete it, whereas Zach Wilson had to thread the needle consistently, and we saw him do that. Didn't see it as much last year, but again, it's a rookie year, and as you said, people like to say, the next man up mantra, which I always kind of laugh at, because sometimes the next man sucks. And that's all there is to it. And when you're playing with no receivers and you're still, looking like a solid quarterback out there, that's pretty encouraging.
I'll tell you this. There are 3 games that I would put on if I'm a Jets fan and I'm concerned about Zach Wilson and I'm a little leery. Go put on the Tennessee game, go put on the Philly game, and go put on the Tampa game. Because in all 3 of those games, you see the flashes of this kid understands the offense. This kid can make throws that no other quarterback can make. You see those flashes. Now he's got to put it together over the full game and over a full season.
Right.
But you see those flashes, and those 3 games always stand out to me. Listen, how many rookie quarterbacks can roll out to the right against Tennessee in the middle of the season when things aren't going well? He's got a pass rusher breathing down his neck, and he's pointing to Corey Davis, just go deep, and then he throws a dime. Not a lot of quarterbacks can do that no matter how long they've been in the league, okay? And those you don't teach those things. Those are that's natural skill that you have. And so when he understands his offense, and late in the season, you saw it, he understood he didn't have to play hero ball. He worked in the confines of the offense. Well, now the confines of the offense have Garrett Wilson. They're hopefully going to have Corey Davis for the entirety of the season. Remember, Corey Davis was on pace for a 1,000-yard season before he got hurt. Elijah Moore in year 2. Elijah Moore, huge down the field threat. 2 running backs that can give you pass catching ability, and a guy in Breece Hall that they clearly believe has home run ability in a running game. Listen, we all want Zach Wilson to be great. Zach Wilson can't throw the ball 50 times to win a football game. You got to be able to run the football. You got to be able to do other things. You got to be able to play defense. You have to do all of these things. And I know that we're all going to focus on the quarterback, but I expect him to grow. I expect him to have a good season. And again, the expectations are that this team has to win more games than they've done the last 2 seasons. And I think it needs to be by a considerable number. And so with that comes pressure. And we'll see when the schedule comes out, the way it lines up, because currently they have a tough strength of schedule based on the way teams played last season. But we'll see. I think you can see a team that was going to win 7 or 8 games next year. I really do.
Yeah, I think I saw someone say the other day, Vegas bumped their win total up by something like 2.5 wins. At post-draft, they had the biggest jump of any team for their over-under for their wins. I think they're at 7.5, which I think is about
5.5 before the draft, and I wanted to put some money down when it was 5.5 because I thought that over was a little ridiculous at the time. But if it's at 7.5, they've now put it at a pretty good number.
Yeah, that's kind of where it should be. I think it's 7-8 wins is about where they could end up. And again, the strength of schedule thing, that's what it is today. Guys get hurt, teams slump, things happen. They'll take that week by week. But thanks a lot for joining us. This is Chris Schubert with the Draft Network, JetNation Radio. I'm Glenn Naughton. Chris, great having you, and hopefully a couple times during the year. Quick question for you guys. I did mention last time I was on, or last time we had you on, that I was new to the Draft Network, to the Draft Dudes pod. What happens for you guys now? Like, I mean, draft's over. Is there a hiatus?
Glenn, the draft never stops. Glenn, the draft keeps on rolling.
Like 2 weeks from now, are you guys talking about next year's prospects, or how does this work?
So I'll give you guys a little bit of a breakdown, right? On Draft Dudes, we're going through the recap. We're going through each division and we're recapping everybody's class, giving our thoughts, giving grades, the guys are. And so we're doing that. And then it'll turn over into, we'll evaluate the first year quarterbacks on the pod, evaluating their situations, right? So we'll look at Kenny Pickett, we'll look at Matt Corral, we'll look at all these guys. Then what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of a retrospective, right? We'll look at the young quarterbacks that are entering year 2. How have their situations changed? And then, the summer scouting stuff will begin and we'll start to have those conversations on the pod, and the draft never stops. We have a motto at TDN, draft day every day. And that's how it works. And the 2023 class is, listen, they're going to play here pretty soon. Spring games are already happening. And so we'll slowly start to release that content. You'll get a summer version of our TDN 100 that'll give the top prospects. And then the college football season will start, and then we'll be having those conversations. But no, the draft never stops. There's a little bit of a break here to kind of recap everything that happened and to look big picture. But no, the summer months we will start scouting once again. The scouting staff, they work very hard to put all that stuff together. So it never stops over at the Draft Network. We keep going.
All right. Once again, Chris Schubert, thanks so much for joining us, and looking forward to having you on again during the season to see how some of these kids are doing and talk about 2023 prospects.
Looking forward to it.
For us now. Thank you very much for listening.